USCHO.com.
Welcome to USCHO Weekend Review for Monday, March 13th, 2023. Each week we look back at the highlights of the weekend in the news of the week. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th, 2023 at Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida. Get your seats now at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. Well, there were a few upsets over the weekend, but let's start with the Big Ten where things went according to plan. Both Minnesota and Michigan won those games going away. 7-3 win for Michigan over Ohio State. A couple empty net goals in that one. An empty netter capped off a 5-1 win for Minnesota over Michigan State. So really, we ended up with who we expected in that. The two best teams, Minnesota and Michigan, they'll play at Mariucci. Is anybody a real favorite here? I would have to think that Minnesota is a favorite. Are they a big favorite, or is it going to be more of a toss-up in this one?
Well, I'll start here. First of all, what a great weekend of hockey. I mean, switching from channel to channel, I had two TVs going, my phone going. I mean, that was exciting, an exciting week of hockey. A great weekend for college hockey fans. And I think with the amount of games that are going on, that's a better weekend than the regionals, actually, because of how exciting some of those games and overtimes were. But to answer your question, I think Minnesota's got to be the favorite. They've been the number one team all year. They're got an offense that can just go. I watched a lot of their game against Michigan State, and they dominated. They got the lead, extended it, and just continued to pull away. And with the year they've had, I think they're a clear-cut favorite. I think last year Michigan was the clear-cut favorite in the Big Ten. I think Minnesota's done everything that they've needed to do to be a number one seed. And I think they're going to be, by winning this game here on the weekend, they're going to be number one overall seed for sure.
Yeah, I mean, what a great weekend, as you said, Derek, just across all of college hockey. But, two dominant performances. We'll get to this on weekends on USCHO Edge later in the week. But yes, the sports books already have established Minnesota as a clear favorite over Michigan in this game. Not a heavy, but not just a slight favorite. They're if this was basketball, you'd probably consider this like a 5-point favorite. Would be the equivalent for Minnesota. So it's pretty strong. People have strong feelings about this Minnesota team. I'm interested. We're going to get into it later in the program where they might end up in the bracket. I think you're right. They're probably the guaranteed number one overall seed right now. I don't see Quinnipiac really having a chance to catch them. Really impressive season for both of these teams. And I was I was broadcasting on Saturday night. So I'm just kind of watching these games out of the corner of my eye on my phone, and neither one of them seemed to have trouble. I mean, yeah, I know that, Minnesota fell behind 1-0, but once they got going, they became a roller coaster. And same thing for Michigan. They got the goals. They kept extending the lead. Pretty impressive showing for both of those teams.
Well, I mean, obviously you brought up roller coasters. Now we're going to be reviewed on other roller coaster podcasts and things like that. So it was a downhill train. Let's put it that way. They kept it going. And it was not in doubt to me. I mean, I when it got to be 4-1, that's where I started channel surfing and making sure I got to see all the overtime goals and going to both the Hockey East games, because you knew that they weren't going to blow the lead. And I'm expecting a massive crowd at Mariucci, and what better way to have a Minnesota-Michigan final and to make kick off some enthusiasm going into the regionals.
When we turn to the CCHA, one team took care of business and one team was shocked. Minnesota State handled Ferris State 7-2, but the shocker was Northern Michigan, a 4-0 shutout at Michigan Tech. Longtime rivalry between those two programs. But what a great situation. Michigan Tech still probably in the tournament, pretty safely in the tournament. But Northern Michigan could be a spoiler for some other teams and win their way into the NCAA tournament. You know, my quick take on this, if this was last year or a couple of years ago, you wouldn't have any worries for Minnesota State, but they've shown that they can be vulnerable. And if you can shut out a team like Michigan Tech, maybe you got a pretty good shot.
I turned this game on 5 minutes late, 6 minutes late, and it was already basically a 3-0 downhill from there. And it was one of those games where you expected Tech to score and make a little run, expect them to score, make a little bit run, and they never did. And I would say that really, quite honestly, I picked this. That was my upset special. That was one of my upsets. I know I had 3 of them, but I seem to be pretty good in my upsets. So that was not unexpected. I've said it. I said it. They were smoking hot coming into the game, and they just proved it. And we'll see how it transpires next week. But I would say I would not be surprised to see Northern Michigan be one of those teams that took the bid out to make it down to 14 or 13 into the tournament.
Yeah, Northern, they're now a 21-win team. I guess that kind of snuck up on me because they're not in the same pairwise position that Minnesota State or Michigan Tech were going into this weekend. But that's pretty impressive. They've really built up down the stretch. They got as hot as they possibly could at the right time. They could upset things, and looking at some scenarios, it seems that if Minnesota State were to lose on Saturday, there's possibilities of them slipping far enough that they are not locked into the tournament right now. So they're still playing for something on Saturday besides just a CCHA title. They need to win just to have pure security. They could lose and still make it, and it's a pretty good chance that would happen, but I would not feel that secure if I were Minnesota State.
I guess that's what happens when you have a 1-game playoff. But in Atlantic hockey, it was a best of 3 series. Both series went 3 games. Canisius lost game 1, but came back to win 5-1 and 4-2. And they are going to host at Harbor Center in downtown Buffalo next Saturday. But the big upset of the weekend was Holy Cross. They beat number 2 AIC in 3 games last weekend, and then upset RIT on Sunday in game 3, 5-1, 2 empty net goals in that one. 2 things I want to note from that series for Holy Cross. Their goaltender, Jason Grandy, who transferred from Bentley, played in 6 games in 2 seasons there, had an .898 save percentage coming in to the series weekend and had a .951 save percentage, 5 goals on 102 shots over the weekend. Also, their sophomore, Liam McClinsky, who transferred from Quinnipiac, where he only got into a couple of games as a freshman, has 9 goals in 6 games in the Atlantic Hockey playoffs to give him 21 on the season, and he set a playoff record still with another game to go.
Well, we almost saw a purple versus purple final, and but I think there were 2 kind of different series. You had the overtimes in Rochester the first 2 days, and you had winners that were pretty much predetermined going into in the middle of the third period. And then you flipped it on Sunday, and you had a tight game in Buffalo and a not so tight game in Rochester. And I was very surprised. I thought going into the weekend, I thought we'd see an RIT Canisius series. The game 3 just started off bad for RIT and rolled downhill. 5-minute major, a no goal, another 5-minute major, a shorthanded goal, a power play goal, a shorthanded goal, another 5-minute major. It just continued to snowball on RIT. And I've been a part of those as a high seed the last time we played against Niagara. And it's tough to get that train to stop when it's going against you. And it just seemed like nothing was going in RIT's favor. And then across the other side of into the Harbor Center, you had a tight game going to the third, and Canisius just pulled away and got 2 goals and kind of locked it down. And I guess a 4 versus 7 seed in the final hasn't happened in a long time. And here we are.
I thought that was a fantastic weekend of hockey for Atlantic hockey to have both semifinals. You know, it's funny you talk about one league that, they're playing single elimination. Well, by the time it got to Sunday, it felt like single elimination, although I'm sure that Canisius is pretty happy that it was a best of three as they lost the first game. But, I thought that it was a fantastic weekend. The championship game, the semifinal game threes were good hockey. Especially that Canisius Niagara series where Canisius able to find a way to grit that one out. That was a back and forth game. The only thing, that might be kind of disappointing, I'm not sure how large the crowd will be at Harbor Center next Saturday. But, I think if it's at RIT, I'd expect a packed house. I don't know what we'll get up in Buffalo, but still, it should be a pretty good championship game. And there's no way you can think that Holy Cross can't pull off this upset. And win as a number 7 seed. They just have to be playing with so much confidence after taking down teams like AIC and RIT over 2 weekends.
Well, let's turn out eastward to Hockey East, where there were also some upsets where lower seeds won. How about UMass Lowell? They head down to the new building at Storrs, Connecticut. They were the number 5 seed. They beat UConn 2-1. Despite getting outshot 41-17.
It's Norm Bay's in playoff hockey. They took a lead and they found a way to hold on to that lead the entire game. And that is what Norm Bay's In's teams have done well. And credit to UConn, they had a push and a massive push. I think the shots were 15-1 in the third period of that game. But, the one thing that Lowell seems to do every year is find ways to win games that they're not supposed to win in the postseason. And this was probably more of a pick 'em when you really think about it. But I think that, Norm Bay's in, there's something about the way he coaches, and it's meant for playoff hockey. He gets his teams to play the best hockey around this time of year. And I think the stat is that his team has made 6 of the last 9 Hockey East championship games. They've made it to the semifinals 7 of the last 9 years. This will be 8 of 10. I mean, that's a pretty good run for any coach.
Another one of those games where teams scored early and held on, just much like the Michigan Tech game. I mean, you got a couple goals. I'm once again flipping games. I missed the first one. I also watched some dynamic, exciting 4 women's hockey games on Saturday as well. So there's a lot going on in college hockey, and you missed turn it on. It's 1-0. Then Owen Cole pops that one in pretty quickly after to make it 2-0. And you think this isn't going to stay up, and I mean it held up throughout the game until UConn got that late goal, and to keep it close. But once again, another one of those games that somebody got a lead and they held that lead and didn't give it up.
Providence had to win twice in the week, both overtime wins 2-1. They beat 10th seed in Hockey East UNH and then 3rd seed Northeastern. That ended Northeastern's season. Some disappointment there, I'm sure. And now people are also watching to see when Devin Levi will sign, at least where I live in Western New York. Pretty good for Providence, who's been up and down a bit this year.
Yeah, I mean, especially the second half of the year. I think they only had, after January before the playoffs, they only had 3 wins in the second half. So they played really well to get through UNH on Wednesday night. And then Saturday, they had a horrible start to the game. And I'm not sure I'd call it as bad of a start as it was a really good start for Northeastern. Came out, just kind of found ways to just pepper the net, and Providence withstood that barrage. And then when Parker Ford, their captain, scored in the second period, you have a game going. And then what a time to score your first career collegiate goal. Brady Berard in overtime, 4 minutes into the overtime, able to pop one in. And Nate Lehman, I kind of throw him up there with Norm Bay's in. And ironically, as we were calling the games this weekend in Hockey East, they would put a graphic up. The 2 leading playoff winners in current Hockey East. Now, Jerry York would have obviously had the most wins. It's in the hundreds going into last season. He, of course, retires. The 2 now leading winners in games won in Hockey East tournament play, Norm Bay's in number 1, Nate Lehman number 2. So those two guys seem to know how to win, even when their team is the underdog. And I think, you'd have to say that they were the slight underdog in both games this weekend. They find ways to win them.
And they didn't mess around in overtime either. They didn't take 2, 3, 4 overtimes. They came out and they went after it pretty quickly. And, to win 2 overtime games in a weekend, the second one coming off of against a fresh team, that just shows you, the confidence they're playing with right now. And could be another one of those spoilers like Northern Michigan that ends up taking one of those bids away from somebody that's done it all year. And it'll be interesting to watch how they continue to move, because Nate does get his team to play in the playoffs, and it wouldn't surprise me to see them in the Hockey East final and maybe even win that auto bid.
BU and Merrimack both advanced. Merrimack needed double overtime, a thriller there to beat BC 1-0. Merrimack is not a shoe-in yet for the playoffs. If they lose in the semifinal game at the Garden, they could be out depending on what else happens. BU really the only lock right now in Hockey East. But with that, well, first, before we go on to the matchup, how about that double overtime game, Jim?
Oh, fantastic. And I want to credit Merrimack. They had a week for themselves. They won the Northeast 10 in basketball on their home court. Unfortunately, they're still not NCAA tournament eligible, so they won't get to the men's Division I basketball tournament, but they won their first Northeast 10 championship still in their Division I transition. That was a great start for them. That was back, I think, on Tuesday or Wednesday night. And then you get to Saturday, and they absolutely packed that building. You could look through and scan through the entire crowd. You could not find an empty seat anywhere. There were probably about 200 people standing around the glass at Lawler Arena. So credit to Merrimack for packing it and then delivering. Greg Brown, his team played a fantastic game. I think BC hit 3 pipes in the game, including a couple in overtime. And then Merrimack finds a way to get the goal. And that's fun. I mean, to see that building go nuts for that one goal. And listen, this is a program. If you look through the programs in Hockey East, I mean, Merrimack's been in that league for a long time, since the late 80s. They have been to the Garden very few times. They have not won the Hockey East championship. So it really sets up a great weekend at TD Garden. Go back to BU too, by the way. Great job just handling the game. They jumped out quick on Vermont, maintained the lead as Vermont, which is a pesky team, kept coming back, kept coming, got the game to 5-3 at one point, but BU finished the game the way that they should. They are a clear number 1 seed in this tournament for a reason. They are the team that will get into the NCAA tournament, but hats off to Jay Pandolfo, first-year head coach, getting his team to the Garden. Really exciting atmosphere with the Merrimack game. That was one of those games where I kept saying, I'm going to watch a few more minutes and I'm going to go to bed. It got late. And then you just kept watching, and then you're like, you can't stop. And really, the goal was a typical overtime goal. It was a drop pass, kind of jammed the shooter a little bit, but he got it off quick and, surprised Benson 5-hole. But it was one of those games where you could see it going a couple overtimes because they were so tight and there were so many. There wasn't a lot of chances, in my opinion. I thought that other than the crossbars and a couple face-off plays, there was a lot of there. It was tough to get ice. It was tough to get ice in that game. And but hats off. First of all, I'm going to give a stick tap, and I know you appreciate this, Ed, to Steve Metcalf. Friend of the program. Steve called me last night, but I heard it on the Merrimack game. Steve started at the BU game, went to watch the Northeastern women's game on TV, went to the Northeastern game, saw an overtime, was kind of just hanging around, got in the car, started driving home, and then was like, wait a second, they're in overtime. And then, according to him, broke every law possible to get to Merrimack in time to see the second overtime. But saw 3 of the 4 men's games and the women's game all in that day. And so hats off to Steve. I know that he pumped his own tires to me last night when he called me and patted himself on the back. But
to be able to see 3 men's games and watch on TV the women's games, pretty cool thing for him to do. And I'm sure the student athletes of Hockey East appreciate that.
And I'm pretty sure he was appointed to the position before Don Lucia was at CCHA. So we can call Steve Metcalf after the season the Dean of Division I college hockey commissioners.
Well deserved.
Well, with that, let's take a break. We have 2 more leagues to talk about, plus some PairWise implications. USCHO Weekend Review is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th, 2023, at Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida.
All right, class, it's the NCAA Men's Frozen Four. Welcome to Fandom 101. Want to help your team rule the rink? Here's your assignment. Lesson 1, go big for every goal. 2, when you bring it, bring enough for the whole class. And 3, attendance is encouraged, but passion is mandatory. The NCAA Men's Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa, Florida. Buy your tickets today at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. Class dismissed.
We're back with USCHO Weekend Review. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. ECAC was all sweeps. 3 of the top seeds won, Quinnipiac, Harvard, and Cornell. But Colgate downed St. Lawrence on the road, an overtime win on Friday, coming back from a 3-0 deficit to win 4-3, and then a 3-2 win on Saturday. So Don Vaughn gets to join Quinnipiac, Harvard, and Cornell with his Raiders up at Lake Placid this coming weekend.
Really good hockey game. It looked like it was going to be a blowout. St. Lawrence got going. They were hot. They were fast. They put pucks to the net. And then all of a sudden the game switched and changed. And they got a couple bounces. I think the first goal that Colgate got hit a St. Lawrence defenseman around the front of the net. And then the overtime winner, obviously, guy kind of busted through and went short side. But really good hockey game. And for the most part, the ECAC was the same. I mean, the high seeds won, except this one. But these were 2 teams that were really close. They were really close as far as standings. I think they had, I think Colgate actually had beat them twice during the regular season. So this is not a surprise. I'm really excited to see Harvard Cornell. Minus no North Country teams and Lake Placid. This is going to be a really neat series to be able to take that rivalry to Lake Placid, and obviously having the Cornell fans there will get that thing going. But interesting weekend for the Cornell against Clarkson too. A lot of penalties in that game. I thought Clarkson really kind of took it on the chin as far as the penalties in game 1 went. I thought it was a little bit one-sided. I know Casey wasn't happy. He spent a lot of time talking to the referees and giving it to the referees, but it'll be interesting to see moving forward because you got your 2 marquee programs there in the Ivy Leagues of Cornell and Harvard playing in that game, and followed by obviously Colgate, Quinnipiac. You got to have Quinnipiac as the favorite to come through that right now, as the way that they've breezed kind of through the playoffs right now.
They certainly should be the favorite, but you look at the 2 games they played against Colgate, a 3-2 win early in the year, and then one of their 2 losses in the ECAC there in that weekend when they played at Cornell at Colgate. They lost both of those games, a 3-2 loss to Colgate back on January 21st. Now, since that team, since that weekend, it's been perfection. They haven't lost a single game. It might be helpful, though, for Rand Pecknold and his team, the fact that they've lost to this Colgate team. You have your antenna up a little bit more. It's not something that you're getting surprised by. You know that this team is good. They're hot. They're coming in. And, so you saw it as a coach, Derek. If your team takes an opponent too lightly, it gets scary. You know it as a coach. Sometimes you get that feeling. This shouldn't be one where this Quinnipiac team is the top seed should be taking Colgate lightly at all.
I don't think anybody takes anybody lightly once we get to the Final Four of the tournament. I mean, you got the eye on the prize. You played for this the whole year, and you got to make sure this is where bad bounces, bad goals, bad penalties, not getting a puck out, not getting a puck in. Every play matters down the stretch. Now, it's not as profound for Quinnipiac because they will continue to play the following weekend, but for Colgate, for all the teams that are outside the PairWise bubble that we'll talk about, this is where you need to keep things rolling and every play matters. And you'll hear that from me a lot because I think that that's really indicative of hockey from here on out. You don't block a shot. You don't get a puck in. You don't get things deep. That ends your season. And you don't want that to be on you. So you make sure you do all that. If you don't, your ice time could be limited or your team could be watching the next round from there.
Let's turn to the NCHC. There were 2 sweeps on the weekend. Nobody probably surprised about Denver taking care of business with Miami. But, we talked about Western Michigan last week. We talked about it on our USCHO Edge podcast. I think the term buzzsaw was used, yet Colorado College ended up getting a 2-game upset over Western Michigan.
Who saw that coming?
I didn't. I mean, that was the shocker to me.
Of the weekend.
Maybe. Of the week. I mean, RIT falling to Holy Cross, maybe. But this one, I mean, this one was really shocking. I mean, Western just was, they were on a roll. I mean, they were a truck going into these playoffs. And
CC wasn't.
No, and they weren't, right? Like, that's the whole thing, is that they somehow found a way. Credit Chris Mayotte and his coaching staff for getting this team up and ready to play. And you win one in overtime, and next thing you're going to Minnesota for the frozen face-off. A fantastic weekend for CC.
And they will get to take on Denver in the first semifinal. They'll play the Pioneers in their 4th different venue this season. You know what?
That's what you get. You upset. You keep getting top seeds. And we talked about Holy Cross earlier. They get top. They got the. They get the 3rd seed, and then not the 1 seed.
2 and 1, yeah.
Yeah. Now you're gonna see a 2 and a 1. You're gonna if Colorado College keeps wanting to play, they're gonna keep getting big time teams that they got to beat. And I don't think they beat Denver yet this year. So it's. You always say it's tough to beat somebody 4 times. It's certainly tough to beat somebody 5 times. But I'm gonna go Denver. You can't bet against them in this game.
No, but it's great to get such a big rivalry game on an even bigger stage.
Well, that was the Cornell Harvard game too, obviously.
The other 2 series went 3 games, and North Dakota on the road prevailed over Omaha. St. Cloud State took care of business at home. I thought maybe the Bulldogs of Minnesota Duluth would have an opportunity there, but those 2 teams will face each other next weekend.
Is anybody shocked about that? I mean, we just said wow on the Colorado College game, but is anybody shocked that North Dakota beat Omaha? I don't think so. The streak that Duluth had been to 7 straight NCAA tournaments, the longest there was. So that streak's over, but wow, what a good streak that is for Scott Sandlin and Duluth. I mean, that's consistency. That's being there every year, being one of the top teams every year. And, I'm sure that they're disappointed, but they give somebody else a chance, I guess now. But I'm not shocked as much as I'm shocked about the Colorado College, Western Michigan, North Dakota. That was one of my, I kept throwing out upsets. That was one that I think you talked about it, Ed. I mean, nobody's shocked by that. You could see that one coming. But hey, here we go. We got to win hockey games. North Dakota, 2 teams in the final 4 in Minneapolis that are going to have to win. I mean, to keep playing. You're going to see some desperation by both Colorado College and North Dakota.
That's one of those games you talk about playoff time and penalties and bounces and things like that. North Dakota has had a terrific power play this season, and maybe that will help them out and get them to that championship game of the NCHC. Well, while we're talking about this, our last item to get to is the PairWise and where it stands today. And after you get through semifinal rounds in some leagues and quarterfinals in the others, there are not all that many options left going into the tournament. Now, Merrimack at number 14 and Alaska at number 15. And I know fans in Fairbanks have got to be on the edge of their seat, pins and needles, biting their nails. You can fill in your favorite cliche there. But it's not dire for Alaska, but things have to fall the right way. Same with Merrimack. Nobody's going to be able to catch them, it doesn't look like, in the pairwise. Maybe there's a scenario out there. But what you got to worry about is teams below the bubble winning a conference tournament. So let's take a look at where things look right now. Atlantic hockey, it's going to either be Canisius or Holy Cross that get in there. They'll be the number 16. They're both way down in the 40s in the pairwise. And if Holy Cross gets in, there'll be a couple of games below 500 getting into the tournament. The Big Ten, nobody can catch up with that. It's Minnesota and Michigan. They're up there. They're in it. Both of them are in it. And Minnesota, even with a loss, probably doesn't drop out of the top. Northern Michigan can play spoiler in the CCHA. Colgate in the ECAC. UMass Lowell and Providence in Hockey East and in the NCHC, North Dakota and Colorado College. Let's take a look at those scenarios. I think if I'm an Alaska fan, I'm not going to be nervous, but I'm going to be watching very closely what happens in all these games this weekend.
I'll let Jimmy touch all that, but one thing that really stuck out to me that you said there, Holy Cross is a 16 seed versus Minnesota. I mean, you're talking history there. You're talking history. So, Jimmy, you dive in that, but
hang on that one. Can you imagine if that game is played in Fargo?
Oh, yeah.
And all those North Dakota fans there.
Yeah. Welcome back. Are we talking?
You're stealing my thunder, because that was one of the last points I wanted to make here. I mean, so I just want to say that technically anybody that finishes from 11 to 16 in the pairwise could get bumped. Obviously, you have Atlantic hockey. If Northern Michigan won, if Colgate won, either Lowell or Providence won Hockey East, or North Dakota or Colorado College wins the NCHC. That's probably not going to happen. But if one of them, I think one is likely. I think Hockey East could be that one if Providence or Lowell were to win. If Merrimack loses to Lowell in the semis, which would be how Lowell could win, Merrimack could fall below Alaska, and that would put them on the 15 bubble, and that could knock them out. I just kind of want to explain a few things. Same thing goes for Minnesota State. If they were to lose, they could fall to that 15 or maybe 14 and be in a scenario where you get a couple of upsets and knock them out. But you mentioned that one, Derek, if Holy Cross would have maybe played Minnesota 2006 all over again in North Dakota. But imagine this scenario here. Minnesota, you want to get them as close to home as possible as the number 1 overall seed. What if North Dakota wins and they are the 15 seed in the tournament and they have to play in Fargo, and you want to send Minnesota to Fargo as the number 1 overall seed playing the number 15 overall? It doesn't fit everybody's scenario, but do you want to then just to make sure that doesn't happen? Do you want to rob the fans of getting to watch their team play and put them somewhere in Allentown, or put them in Bridgeport, or put them in Manchester?
I brought that up a couple of weeks ago in TMQ and had somebody from Minnesota reply to me, "We want to play the lowest seed. We'll drive to Allentown." I don't know if he speaks for all the fans, but
right. Even if you go to Allentown, then your second game, you're threatened to maybe play Penn State in front of all of their home fans. So you really have to send them to one of the 2 Eastern regions if you want to just make, and then you have to obviously take, either Canisius or Holy Cross. I don't think that Holy Cross would have the same fan base as a North Dakota would if they get to play in a regional, closer to home. But it's going to leave us with some head scratchers if North Dakota wins. And obviously then the Holy Cross one sets up a weird scenario as well.
Yeah. And you bring up another thing too. If North Dakota's 15, Quinnipiac, do you, instead of putting them in their backyard in Bridgeport, send Quinnipiac to Fargo? I don't think you do that.
No, it's really doesn't, you want to protect the gate. I mean, the most fair would be to put Quinnipiac away from North Dakota. It would be to put Minnesota away from North Dakota. But then, who are we putting? So Denver can't get North Dakota in the first round. So that leaves, whoever that fourth team is, it looks like it's probably going to be Michigan, right? If my memory serves me right.
Or
BU could sneak in there, but it's much more possible, I think, for Michigan. It seems crazy to be doing all of this, having to do a lot of this maneuvering. But that's what happens when hosts make the tournament. I mean, a month and a half ago, we weren't even talking about North Dakota making the NCAA tournament. Now it seems like they're 2 wins away and they're rolling, playing really good hockey. So it's really possible. And I would then love to just be a fly on the wall in that committee room. Schools, you've been in it before. I'd love to hear the conversation of how people are trying to justify keeping the number 1 seed away, keeping Quinnipiac closer to home. I mean, it would be crazy the way all the scenarios would then have to draw out.
See, I never got any interesting ones like that because my first year on the committee was Buffalo, and it was we bracket integrity. We moved everybody. We had it pretty easy. Next year,
that was one of the easiest years ever.
Yes. Yeah. Minus attendance. But then we had COVID the next year. And then the next year, we actually picked them. And that was interesting. That's where I could say I did something that nobody else did. And I watched the process of how a different sport picks it and how they do it. So mine were very easy, didn't happen. And then something that probably won't happen in hockey again for a long time. And I was reading online somewhere that said, we did a terrible job when we did it. And because Mike Kemp's team got in, he was the chair of the committee, blah, blah, blah. The story is Mike Kemp's team was not in. Mike Kemp's team was going to be the first team out. And then St. Lawrence came down with COVID, which put Nebraska Omaha back in. So whoever put that on Twitter, and everybody jumped on it the other day of how nobody wants it like that. That was tough because we had the chair of the committee in there and he couldn't vote for his own teams. And we actually went from not putting him in to having to put him in because St. Lawrence got COVID. I mean, there's so many different scenarios and so many different agendas that people think are happening, but they're really not. These are people that are basically volunteering way too much of their time to do this. And they're trying to do the best job for hockey. They do it because they love hockey. They don't do it for their league. They don't do it for their team. At the end of the day, Mike Cross, who's on the committee for Penn State, will put Penn State there. And then he will be recused basically from discussing anything that has to do with Penn State. So it's the other people that make those decisions. I think people have to understand that just because somebody's on the committee, that they're not going, hey, we need to do this, because it's been proven with what happened in Nebraska Omaha that the committee will go against all that stuff for the best decision of hockey. And that's where it comes down to. There will be no side deals, cigar smoke, all that kind of stuff. They will do what's best for hockey. And I have complete confidence in that group that will do what they have to do to make it successful.
Yeah, that was the 1970s. That was the 1970s and 80s where you had lawsuits and a 5th team once added to the tournament because somebody felt slighted in a 4-team tournament. So that's gone.
Yeah, and just a reminder, because we've had some fans ask us, particularly fans up in Alaska, our team isn't playing. How can you guys move them down in the PairWise? The PairWise is math. It's numbers. It's arithmetic. Nobody has any subjectivity with it. Once those numbers there and the 16-team field is done, then there's a little bit of where do we send people to avoid those first-round in-conference matchups, and what do we look at for getting attendance? That stuff happens, but the teams that get in are the teams that the numbers say are in.
And if you don't believe that, anytime you guys talk about the 16 teams and how they're going to get them and all the math and everything, I don't say a word, because sometimes I just need you to tell me exactly how it's going to be. And this is how it was on the committee. You give me those teams, we'll move them around. I don't understand that. You guys do. You got Jim comes up with all the percentages so quickly, and Tim Dennehy and all this. And I mean, you're given, here's where you're given, here's the criteria, here's your teams, move them around, make it successful, and do the best job you can. And that's what they're going to do. And we won't see we won't talk before the selection show of next week. But I have confidence. I know these people on the committee. Last year would have been my last year on the committee. They'll do a great job, and they'll do it as fair as possible. And people are going to be upset. And if Alaska doesn't get in, it's not the committee's fault. It's the math's fault.
Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up. And we certainly will have a lot to talk about next Monday when we see the field of 16 and maybe do some post-mortem on how things get moved around.
I thought we were doing buy or sell. Maybe no buy or sell here.
Maybe next
buy
week.
Or sell, will this team win a game?
Oh, wait. Buy or sell, Alaska in or out? You two. I don't know the math.
I would have to buy based on the percentages, but
I still play odds. The odds say that they're still favored to get in. I think it's about 68% as of this morning, if I remember it right.
But it says a 15 seed. Most of them it says a 15 seed, though, right?
They need chalk, as they say. They need all the favorites to win this weekend.
Yep, they need. Yep.
Well, we'll certainly be watching intently. It's going to be a great weekend of hockey. It's the best weekend every year, the league championships. And USCHO Weekend Review has been sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 6th and 8th at Amalie Arena in Tampa. Get your tickets right now at ncaa.com/mfrozen4. You can find our podcasts at uscho.com/podcast or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. For Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley, I'm Ed Trefzger, and this has been USCHO Weekend Review.